Welcome to Spectacle on Television Nigeria. I am your host, Daniel Atai. Welcome to Spectacle. I am Daniel Atai. We have to look into the issue of Flight Officer Tolulupe ARITOLE'S death as Nigerian Air Force clears the air from the insinuations of religious and ethno-tribal and political shenanigans. Also, we shall be taking a look at the corruption within the NDC and the expenditure so far in less than 6 months. We take a short break, and when we return, our guest analyst in the studio will do justice to the body of the topics. Please stay tuned. Welcome to Spectacle on Television Nigeria. I am your host, Daniel Atai. Welcome back. I have a human rights activist and the president of Arewa Youth Forum in the studio, Comrade Salihu Dantata. Comrade, you're welcome to Spectacle.
Thank you very much, Arewa Youth for Peace and Security, and I'm the acting president.
Acting president. Thank you. And also Mr. Charles Ibe is in the studio too on this topic. Mr. Charles Ibe is a media consultant and a socio-political affairs commentator. Dr. Charles, you are welcome to Spectacle.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, sir. And we may be joined via our Zoom handle by Barrister Destiny Tanko DL, a legal practitioner and a political commentator from faraway Niger Delta, as we discuss the NDDC corruption within. Gentlemen, before we continue the program, I would like us to have a background reportage of the the Nigerian Air Force clearing the air on the ARITOLE'S death because of the insinuations and the innuendos making round that there has been a foul play over the death of the flight officer. Before we begin, let us look into the press statement by the Nigerian Air Force dismissing foul play on the death of the young and promising flight officer ARITOLE. Please take a pleasure listening and watching. This press statement is strictly coming from Air Commodore Ibukunle Daramola, the Director of Public Relations and Information, Nigerian Air Force, on the issue that led to the death of Flight Officer Tolulupe ARITOLE. And I read, preliminary investigation and report on the death of Flying Officer Tolulupe ARITOLE. On the 14th July 2020, the Nigerian Air Force, and indeed the entire nation, was thrown into mourning as a result of the death of one of our shining young stars in the person of Flying Officer Tolulupe ARITOLE, the Nigerian Air Force first female combat helicopter pilot. Her unfortunate demise has elicited an overwhelming outpouring of condolences, prayers and support to the Nigerian Air Force as well as the ARITOLE'S family. This has no doubt been so, not just for Tolulupe's outstanding accomplishment at the tender age of 24, but also because of her sterling personal qualities of excellence, hard work, dedication to duty, confidence and courage, which endeared her to her superiors, subordinates and peers in the service. Unfortunately, Because of the peculiar circumstances of the incident that led to her death, a rash of falsehoods, innuendos, conspiracy theories, and the likes have been propagated in the public space, especially on social media. The Nigerian Air Force sincerely hopes that the findings of the just concluded preliminary investigation into this unfortunate and painful incident will address the misinformed issues raised in the social media on the tragedy. Moreover, while it would have been ideal for the entire investigation to be concluded before details on the incident are released, the Nigerian Air Force insensitivity to public concerns occasioned by the spread of false information appreciates the imperative to provide more clarity at this very difficult moment. Please note that details being revealed today have already been communicated to the ARITOLE family, who ideally should be allowed to mourn their daughter and sister in peace, but for the unfortunate nature of the sad occurrence. In line with the normal procedure in the Nigerian Air Force, during such occurrences, an investigation was immediately instituted to formally determine the circumstances of the incident. Accordingly, the investigation has revealed the following details. The late flying officer Tolulupe Arotile, a squadron pilot at the 405 Helicopter Combat Training Group 405 HCTG, Enugu, attached to the air component of Operation Gamma Ike in Minna, having recently completed her promotion examinations, was in Kaduna awaiting deployment for her next assignment. During this period, she stayed with her sister, Mrs. Damilola Adegboye, at Sabo area in Kaduna, visiting the NAF base whenever necessary. On 14 July 2020, at about 10:55 a.m., late flying officer Arotile received a phone call from her colleague, flying officer Perry Karimo, a fellow helicopter pilot from the 405 HCTG, who wanted to discuss arrangements for their return to Enugu, requesting that she comes to the base so that they could work out the modalities. Subsequently, at about 10:58 a.m., the late Arotile placed a call through to squadron leader Depriye Batubo, the group operations officer GOO of 405 HCTG, who was in Minna at the time, to clarify issues regarding her deployment. It must be highlighted that the call from flying officer Karimo as well as the one to the squadron leader Batubo both took place before 11 a.m., over 5 hours before the incident which led to her death. Flying officer Rotile was later conveyed from Sabo to the NAF base, Kaduna, by her sister, Mrs. Adegboye, where the deceased dropped her phone for charging at the house in the instructor pilot's quarter belonging to squadron leader Alpha Ekele. Her elder sister later dropped her off at the base Mami Market at about 4 p.m., where she proceeded to photocopy and laminate some documents. It was while she was returning from the Mami Market at about 4:30 p.m. that 3 of her former schoolmates at the Air Force Secondary School, now Air Force Comprehensive School, Kaduna, Mr. Nehemiah Adejo, Mr. Igbekele Folorunsho, and Mr. Festus Gbeogun, drove past her in a Kia Sorento SUV with registration number AZ478 MKA. It is noteworthy that Mr. Adejo, Folorunsho, and Gbeogun are all civilians who lived outside NAF base Kaduna, but were on their way to visit one Mrs. Chioma Ugu, wife of squadron leader Chukwuemeka Ugu, who lives at a cargo quarters of the base. Upon recognizing their schoolmate, Arotile, after passing her, Mr. Adejo, who was driving, reversed the vehicle in an attempt to quickly meet up with the deceased, who was walking in the opposite direction. In the process, the vehicle struck flying officer Arotile from the rear, knocking her down with significant force and causing her to hit her head on the pavement. The vehicle ran over part of her body, causing her further injuries. Flying officer Arotile was subsequently rushed to the 461 NAF Hospital, Kaduna, for treatment, while Mr. Folorunshaw, one of the occupants of the vehicle, who is also an accident and emergency nurse at the St. Gerard Catholic Hospital, Kaduna, administered first aid. Flying Officer Rotile was confirmed dead at about 4:45 p.m. on 14th July 2020 as a result of the head injuries. The trio of Mr. Nehemiah Adejo Igbekele Folorunshaw and Festus Gbayegun were immediately detained at the Air Provost Wing 453 Base Services Group, Kaduna, as investigations began. They were subjected to toxicology tests at the 461 NAF hospital, but no traces of alcohol or psychotropic substances were found in their system. It was, however, discovered that the driver of the vehicle, Mr. Nehemiah Adejo, did not have a valid driver's license. Traffic officers from the Kawo Police Station and the Kaduna State Police Command, as well as road traffic experts from the Federal Road Safety Corps, also called to provide support during the investigation. Having carefully considered the foregoing, the preliminary investigation concluded that the death of Flying Officer Rotile was caused by blunt force trauma to the head and significant bleeding resulting from being struck by the vehicle. Being a civil case, the matter will be handed over to the Nigerian police with a view to further investigating and charging the suspect to court in accordance with extant laws. 5. The Nigerian Air Force, being a highly professional and disciplined organization, will not join issues with any individuals or groups regarding the spurious allegations of foul play espoused in some quarters. Suffice it to say that Flying Officer Rotile was a pride of the Nigerian Air Force, in whom the service had invested massively in terms of resources, time, and energy. Consequently, it is ludicrous for anyone to even remotely insinuate malevolent intent on the part of the service, that is, the Nigerian Air Force Service, against one of its most prized assets. Furthermore, it is extremely sad and disheartening that rather than allow the Rotile family and the Nigerian Air Force to grieve for our dearly departed Tolulupe in peace, many have chosen to politicize her death, while others are using the incident to push meritless, misguided ethnic and religious agendas. The Nigerian Air Force wishes to employ everyone to respect the sensibilities of all those who have suffered most by these laws. Those who really knew Tolulupe, her family, her friends, and her Nigerian Air Force colleagues. Thank you for your attention. Ibukule Daramola, Air Commodore, Director of Public Relations and Information, Nigerian Air Force, released on the 19th July 2020. Welcome back. That was the background report of what led to the death of Flight Officer Ritile, as cleared by the Nigerian Air Force Department. And of course, our heart goes to the family of Flight Officer Ritile. From Television Nigerian, we send our condolences to you, and may God give you the fortitude to bear this irreparable transition. And gentlemen in the studio, the president of the Ariwa Youth, the acting president, Dantata is in the studio here on the Charles TV, media guru and consultant is also here to analyze this unfortunate incident. I will start from you. From your own quarter, you have had the press statement from the NAF. Does it look like foul play that led to the young flight officer's death?
Yeah, you see, in this digital media age, even people that are not acquainted with certain security information and don't even know what the setup of security circle cutting across armed forces, police, and others are, tend to create fusion and confusion. What am I trying to say? From when this gallant and combatant female pilot, whom I feel not to Nigeria alone, to Africa as a whole, went into, where we are all going to go to one day, that is death, I think there were certain controversies that came to be. There is no way the military I know, especially at the officer cadre angle, this esprit de corps, one spirit of purpose is always there, whether in the land army, air force, or navy. And I will give examples. If you take the regular combatant course and the short service course, for any of these cadre, if, for example, doctor is my regular combatant course mate in the Defense Academy, or we enrolled or enlisted through the same short service course, that spirit of love is always there. Yeah. So that is why for anyone whatsoever to attach the demise of ARITOLE to being a kind of foul play from either the flying officer that called her earlier or the squadron leader, for what purpose? Was it that ARITOLE of blessed memory was chief of defense staff? Or was it that ARITOLE was director of Air Force policy and plans? Or was it that ARITOLE was air officer commanding? No. These are all young officers. Okay. When you take the equivalent of squadron leader to the land army, it is equivalent to a major. Okay. That flying officer, what is the equivalent? So these are still...
It was even in Niger State.
So what I'm trying to say...
Okay, the colleague that called her is even 5 hours.
So the issue I'm trying to present for record purpose, yes, we shouldn't forget in a hurry, there was the commanding officer of Ribado Cantonment in Kaduna, okay, who fell similar fate in Makodi. Okay. This man just came back from battlefield in the northeast, the lieutenant colonel. Then he was newly posted to become the commanding officer of Ribado Cantonment. He went to Makodi, his state, for holiday, annual leave. He decided to hang out with friends. He sent his driver oddly on errand. Then after the lighter refreshment and outing they had with friends, one of the friends opted to drop him at home. In the process of reversing at the spot where they had drinks, the vehicle of the friend reversed and instantly killed that lieutenant colonel. That was somebody who was a commanding officer of a cantonment in Kaduna. So if we now bring it to ARITOLE'S death, you can see these issues have spiritual link. Okay. You see, these are people that went to give their life, okay, spiritual for the defense of the territorial integrity of the country. Don't expect these bandits, kidnappers, or terrorists not to always be praying, because between the members of the armed forces and these bandits and terrorists, there is line drawn. Okay. There is no way they will want this. And mind you, the antecedent of ARITOLE was that she was a combat pilot, yes, who fought in some forests, yes, in those areas. And you know that. So the issues are, even with the link of the agitator that drove the vehicle and what have you, the spiritual which might have come from another place other than this, but somebody is always used as a scapegoat. So I don't want us to attach it to a foul play within the Air Force. The Air Force, as we know, as one of the arms of the armed forces, they have had history of togetherness, unity, and fighting. Look at the fight against insurgency in the northeast and some part of the country. It is majorly and mainly executed between the land army and the Air Force. And to the best of my knowledge, I know that even among the other ranks, to the officers, there is always this love, because what they do is that as they are growing as young officers, they are always praying that let's be together, in either the rank of wing commander, group captain, air commodore, air vice marshal, and no co-pilot of the combat force of the Air Force would like to see that his hand is swelled in the killing or demise of ARITOLE'S. So I think beyond this, let us think the country, let us think as one, and let us put off some kind of myopic insinuations that there was foul play from the Air Force officers that called that earlier. And thank God the investigation has shown that there was about 5 hours difference. So I attach it, like I said, to more of spiritual. And don't also forget our combatant and gallant Lieutenant Colonel Abu Ali.
Okay.
What happened at the battlefield? So once an officer comes to display gallantry, combatant nature, has patriotism and zeal to defend the territorial integrity against the onslaught of the bandits, terrorists, as well as other people that are enemies of the state, there is that tendency that those enemies too sometimes don't relent in some of the evil things they do. So may the soul of Flying Officer ARITOLE have eternal rest in peace.
Amen. Well, it's quite unfortunate, Mr. Charles. Could you say some photos like on our Facebook handle already? People are started reacting, and some say that the Air Force, do they have camera? And see, this one said, let me say what he said, because I was trying to relate that issue. This brings to the fore that Air Force Base does not even have a surveillance camera. Can this kind of thing happen in any Air Force base in UK? And do you think it is a matter of surveillance camera? They have investigated, and people testified already that that was what happened. 3 friends of ours were reversing, they were schoolmates and classmates, and they happened to see and they say, let's rush and meet our flight patriot who is making wave in the country. And unfortunately, they drove and hit her. What could you say about this?
Well, first I would say is my condolences to the family.
Yes.
It's death. Death is death. She died.
Yes.
One. And then
prime age.
It was an accident. Talk about surveillance camera or whatever you have. There's been a report. In Nigerian
Air Force.
The Air Force is a very reputable organization.
Yes.
Whether they have surveillance cameras or
I think they even have. They should have.
It's inconsequential at this point.
Yeah.
They've done their own investigation, and this is their findings. And don't forget the fact that there must have been eyewitnesses.
Yeah, of course.
Because it happened in the open. It's not something that happened in the hidden. And then you also